At an abandoned construction site in a remote village, a poor black girl accidentally rescues a man who has been kidnapped and brutally beaten. She risks everything to hide him in her late father's old hut. But her act of kindness sparks her family's fury. Her mother and sister throw her out of the house. Refusing to give up, she leads the stranger to the city, tending to his wounds and keeping him safe. What she doesn't know is that the man she saved is a wealthy tech CEO, and what happens next will change both of their lives forever. Before we dive into this emotional story, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so I can share the next part with you tomorrow. Harry Ward had always believed in control. It wasn't arrogance, at least not in the way people usually mean it. It was the kind of calm, calculated confidence that came from knowing every detail in your life was planned, accounted for, and backed by more security than most people could imagine. As the CEO of one of the most influential tech firms in New York, Harry was the kind of man who didn't rush, didn't worry, and didn't fear. At 35, he had already sat on panels with governors, spoken at global forums, and been featured on the covers of business magazines. He wore custom-tailored suits, lived in a penthouse overlooking the skyline, and was used to hearing words like brilliant, disciplined, and visionary thrown around his name in boardrooms and press conferences. And yet, on this quiet evening, something entirely unplanned was waiting for him. It was close to midnight when Harry decided to leave the charity gala. The event had gone well. Photographers had swarmed him at the entrance. He had shaken hands with investors, signed a couple of checks for causes he truly believed in, and spent the last 20 minutes in a private lounge sipping a lowball of neat scotch with his oldest friend and CFO Grayson Merrick. They had talked, as always, about company projections, a new cybersecurity contract, and Grayson had joked in that cool, polished way of his about Harry needing to get some rest for once. "Let the world spin a little without you tonight," he had said, smiling behind his glass. Harry had laughed, tapped him on the shoulder, and stepped out into the night. Normally, his driver would have been waiting outside, but tonight, Sam had taken leave to be with his sick mother. Harry didn't think twice about it. The drive home was only 20 minutes, and he welcomed the alone time. He slid behind the wheel of his matte black sedan, the city lights glittering across the windshield. He tapped the screen on the dashboard, picked a playlist filled with mellow jazz, and eased into the lane, his fingers relaxed on the steering wheel. The roads were unusually quiet. Friday nights in the Upper District were like that, safe, smooth, predictably uneventful. Harry cracked the window to let in the crisp spring air. The city smelled of pine trees and fresh asphalt, a strange but comforting blend. He wasn't in a hurry, and the music matched his mood, slow, deliberate saxophone notes that rolled like a river. For a moment, he let himself sink into the stillness. His phone buzzed. It was his mother, Elizabeth Ward, checking in. He smiled and answered on speaker. "Hi, Mom. Sweetheart, you sound tired." "Long day," he replied, "but the event went well. Grayson stayed with me till the end. I'm glad you're not driving alone." He hesitated for half a beat, not wanting to worry her. "Sam took the night off. I'll be home soon." Elizabeth sighed on the other end. "Just be careful. Okay, no calls while you're driving." "Yes, ma'am." They exchanged I love yous, and the line went dead. Harry reached for his water bottle, placed it back in the holder, and turned into a long stretch of highway. There were no other cars. The street lamps passed overhead like measured heartbeats. He leaned back against the leather seat and allowed his mind to wander just a little. He thought about Grayson, about how they had built everything together from scratch back when they were both just out of college, with no money, just drive and ideas. Grayson had always been the quieter one, the strategist. Harry was the speaker, the front man. They balanced each other, or so he thought. He never saw the SUV coming. It appeared out of nowhere, a dark blur that cut across the intersection and swerved directly in front of him. His reflexes kicked in. He slammed the brakes. The tires screeched, and the seatbelt locked tight across his chest. The car jolted to a halt inches from the black vehicle now blocking the road. His heart skipped. The music kept playing absurdly calm, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Two men jumped out of the SUV before Harry could even reach for his phone. They moved fast. One of them smashed the driver's side window with something blunt and heavy, sending glass spraying across Harry's face and arms. The other yanked open the door, reached in, and punched Harry hard in the temple. Pain exploded across his head. He tried to speak to ask who they were, but a rough cloth was shoved into his mouth. His arms were pinned. He was dragged from the car like luggage. They worked in silence, practiced, and focused. His wrists were zip-tied behind his back. A dark hood was pulled over his head. Harry's pulse roared in his ears. The moment he tried to struggle, one of the men leaned in close and whispered through clenched teeth, "Keep quiet. Don't move. Don't speak." Harry froze. The cloth was wet with his own blood where the glass had nicked his cheek. His knees scraped against the pavement as they forced him into the back of their SUV. One man got in beside him. The other two climbed up front. The engine roared to life. The vehicle spun around and sped off in the opposite direction, leaving Harry's car idling on the shoulder with the driver's door swinging open, music still playing. After the SUV vanished into the night with Harry, one of the men circled back, slipped into Harry's sleek sedan, and drove it out of sight. He took back roads, careful to avoid tolls and cameras, and eventually parked the car in the underground level of a long-term private garage on the west side of the city. Inside the SUV, the air was hot, suffocating. His chest rose and fell with rapid breaths. His mind raced. Was this a robbery? A kidnapping for money? But who would dare? He thought of Grayson. Maybe he could call. Maybe he could, a voice beside him muttered. Even guys like you got soft spots. Let's see who bleeds for you. Harry's stomach turned. He didn't respond. He couldn't. The SUV kept moving. After several turns and at least 20 minutes, the smooth hum of the highway faded. The tires crunched onto dirt, rocks, maybe gravel. Harry could no longer hear city sounds. No horns, no sirens, no life. Only the low murmur of engines and the soft rustling of wind through trees. They were leaving the city. Another voice from the front seat this time said plainly, "Rich boys think the world doesn't touch them. That skin, that name, that money, they think it protects them. Tonight, we're going to show him different." Harry heard every word. He swallowed hard, the cloth in his mouth, now damp with spit, and the metallic taste of fear. He felt the tight plastic burning into his wrists. His knees hurt. His pride hurt more. This wasn't supposed to happen, not to him. He tried to track time to measure distance, but without sight or sound markers, the world inside the hood became a prison of noise and motion. He started breathing in patterns, trying to slow his heartbeat. He thought of his mother, of Grayson, of Sam, of how stupid he was to drive himself tonight, of how fragile everything suddenly felt. Finally, the SUV slowed. The brakes groaned. The door beside him swung open. Rough hands grabbed him again. They pulled him out of the vehicle feet first, and he stumbled onto uneven ground, dirt weeds, something soft like moss or straw. A breeze hit his face. It smelled of smoke and mud. Move, one of them snapped. He felt the cold end of a gun jabbed into his side. They dragged him forward. A door creaked open. The floor changed texture concrete stone. It felt unfinished. A draft blew through. No lights, no noise, just the sound of their footsteps and his ragged breathing. They sat him down, yanked the hood off. Harry blinked into the dim, dust-covered space, a building half-built or abandoned. No windows, no doors, just shadows and broken blocks. He tried to speak, but the cloth gag still muffled him. One of the men pulled it out roughly. Harry gasped. His voice was hoarse. "Please, just tell me what you want." The tallest man leaned in, crouched to Harry's eye level, and stared at him for a long, long second. "We want to know," he said slowly, "if anybody out there loves you enough to pay for you." Then he stood up, turned around, and walked away. Harry's heart pounded. His legs ached. His mind screamed. This wasn't random. This wasn't just about money. Something felt wrong. Too wrong. And deep in the pit of his stomach, a single sickening thought surfaced, one he didn't want to believe. Someone sent them. But who? The question echoed in his chest as the door slammed shut, leaving him alone in the dark. Harry didn't know how long he had been unconscious. Time had stopped existing the moment the hood went over his head and the SUV rolled into the dirt. His body ached in places he didn't even know could ache. His wrists were still tightly zip-tied behind his back, the plastic biting into his skin, swollen from struggling. His throat was dry, not just from thirst, but from the shock of it all being dragged from his car, beaten and dumped in what felt like the shell of a forgotten building. When his eyes adjusted to the faint light leaking through a hole in the roof, all he could see were crumbling bricks, pieces of metal rods, and piles of dry leaves blown in by the wind. There were no windows, just gaping holes in concrete. The smell was moldy and old, like rain had once soaked everything and left it to rot. He tried to sit up, but his back screamed in protest. His head throbbed from the punch earlier. Still somewhere in the mess of panic and confusion, Harry clung to a single thought: this had to be about money. No one in their right mind would kidnap someone like him for any other reason. Ransom was bad but solvable. Money could fix this. He just had to stay calm and do what they asked. As long as he stayed alive, he had options. Footsteps approached, heavy ones, not rushed, not anxious, controlled. That detail stuck with Harry. These men weren't amateurs. One of them entered ducking slightly under the broken doorway. He wore black from head to toe, including gloves, and moved with confidence. He knelt beside Harry, holding a phone. "You get one call," the man said. His voice was deep, flat, and uninterested, like a mechanic explaining a broken part. "Pick someone who'll bring money. Quick." Harry blinked. His lips were cracked. "No police," the man added, seeing the hesitation. "We'll know." Harry nodded weakly. His heart started racing, but his thoughts remained clear. He couldn't call his parents. Chief Titus Ward and Elizabeth Ward were in their late 60s now. His mother had heart issues. His father was a retired diplomat. Neither of them would be able to handle this. He couldn't risk them panicking, or worse, doing something rash. That left only one person. "Grayson," he said, barely above a whisper. "Call Grayson Merrick. He's my CFO. My best friend." The man didn't react. He unlocked the phone, turned on speaker, and handed it over. Harry's fingers trembled as he dialed the number from memory. Each ring felt like it echoed across the room. The cold concrete beneath him somehow grew colder. Then Grayson picked up. "Harry." His voice was sharp alert. "Where the hell are you? I've been trying to reach you." Harry tried to speak steadily, but emotion choked his voice. "Grayson, I've been taken. I don't know where I am. I need your help. Please don't tell anyone yet. Don't panic my parents. Just help me." Grayson's pause was brief. "Jesus, Harry," he muttered. "What are you talking about? Who are you safe? Are you hurt?" "I'm okay." Harry lied. "They want money. They gave me this one call. I chose you." Grayson's breath came through the speaker, tight and controlled. "All right. I need more details. Do they have a number? Did they say how much?" Harry looked at the man in black. "Talk to him," he said. The man took the phone. "We have your friend. He stays alive as long as we get what we want. Don't call the cops. We'll be in touch." Then he ended the call. The silence that followed was dense, as if the air itself had thickened. The man tossed the phone into the corner of the room and stood up. He looked down at Harry with an unreadable expression and said, "Hope your friend loves you, rich boy, because your life just became his responsibility." Then he walked out the door, creaking closed behind him. Harry sat motionless. The pain in his body was nothing compared to what was building in his chest. It wasn't just fear. It was something deeper: uncertainty. For the first time in his life, Harry had no control. He wasn't behind a desk, didn't have lawyers, didn't have options lined up in neat folders. All he had was hope, and that hope now rested on someone else. He leaned back against the wall, closed his eyes, and took slow, shallow breaths. His mind drifted to every memory he had of Grayson. College days, the late nights coding their first product, the shared apartment with mismatched furniture and dreams bigger than their living room. Grayson had been there through it all, quiet, loyal, sharp as hell. If there was one person he trusted without question, it was him. That thought was the only thing keeping him steady. That and the fact that Grayson now knew where he was. He would move heaven and earth. He had to. But at that exact moment, miles away, in a luxury high-rise in Manhattan, Grayson Merrick sat alone in his glass-walled office, staring at the city below. The call had ended less than a minute ago. His phone lay face down on the desk beside a half-empty glass of bourbon. He didn't look panicked. In fact, he looked calm, almost too calm. He picked up the glass and swirled the liquid inside, watching the amber light catch the edges. Then he smiled. Not a big smile, just a slow, quiet curve of the lips that didn't reach his eyes. He took a sip, set the glass down, and pulled out a second phone. It was older, untraceable, something he kept locked in a drawer for years just in case. He dialed a number. It rang once. "Yeah," came a voice on the other end. He made the call. Grayson said, "Keep him alive, for now. I'll transfer the first drop by morning." The man didn't respond with thanks or instruction. Just a quiet "understood," and the line went dead. Grayson placed the phone back in the drawer, closed it slowly, and leaned back in his chair. The office was silent, the kind of silence that made ticking clocks feel too loud. But there were no clocks here, no ticking, just a man alone surrounded by everything he ever wanted and a growing satisfaction that the plan was working. He looked out the window at the city lights, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was standing in someone else's shadow. Back in the abandoned structure, Harry didn't know any of this. All he knew was the ache in his ribs, the sting in his wrists, and the quiet hope that someone he trusted was working to save him. But that hope was misplaced. The man he thought of as a brother had just locked the first door in a series of cages designed to break him piece by piece. And still, Harry whispered to himself, "Grayson will find me." He didn't know he had already been found. He had just been delivered. Under the pale morning sun of Elunwe, the world moved slowly. There were no high-rises here, no rush-hour sirens or morning stock tickers. Just the low murmur of voices from the market, the distant crows, and the crackle of firewood from roadside vendors setting up for the day. Amina Radebe walked down the dusty path with her usual quiet purpose, a small bag of corn balanced on her left hip, her right hand clutching the corner of her wrapper to avoid tripping over the uneven earth. Her slippers were thin, nearly broken, and the hem of her faded skirt held the color of many seasons. She had chosen a new spot this morning, closer to the bush path where a few motorbikes passed by, and the occasional car from a neighboring village might slow for a quick snack. She hoped it would help her sell more, but deep down, she knew hope didn't sell corn. Amina didn't complain. She didn't cry, not anymore. She had done enough of that when her father died, when her sister Sirah stopped pretending to hide the men she brought home, when her mother started calling her useless in front of strangers. But Amina believed in work in quiet dignity and in the small acts of goodness that no one else saw. Her father used to say that strength was in doing the right thing, even when nobody clapped for you. She had never forgotten that. By the time she reached the clearing near the abandoned structure at the edge of the village, the fire in her clay stove had started to burn evenly. She crouched down, placing the corn carefully over the rack, listening to the first crackling sounds. A soft wind brushed past her ear, carrying with it a sound that didn't belong, something faint, distant, not quite human at first. She paused, tilted her head. It came again. "Help! Please!" She straightened up slowly. Her heart skipped. She glanced around. The road was empty. The market was too far for voices to carry. Again, the sound came. It was not loud, but it was filled with the kind of desperation that made her stomach tighten. Amina wiped her hands on her wrapper, grabbed her corn knife, and moved toward the abandoned house. She didn't run. Her steps were cautious, silent, every footfall measured. The building had been empty since she was a child, a place kids dared each other to enter on moonless nights. Now, as she approached the open doorway, the sun filtered through cracks in the wall and danced across the broken floor. She stepped inside. The smell hit her first dampness, blood, sweat, and fear. Then she saw him. A man lay slumped against the far wall, barely conscious. His shirt was torn, blood smeared across his cheek, his wrists raw from zip ties that had been half cut but not freed. His skin was pale, face gaunt, jaw tight. His lips moved slightly, but no sound came this time. For a second, Amina froze. Her breath caught. He was white. That alone was unusual here. A white man in Elunwe in this place, tied up like an animal. It made no sense. But she didn't stay frozen. She stepped forward, quickly dropped to her knees beside him, and whispered, "Hey, can you hear me?" Her voice was soft but firm. He opened his eyes just a little. There was confusion there, fear, pain. His mouth trembled. "Water. I don't have any here," she said, looking around. "But I can help. I need to cut you loose. Can you stay still?" He gave a weak nod. She pulled her corn knife from her wrapper, positioned the blade carefully between his wrists, and started sawing through the plastic. Her hands were steady, her fingers strong from years of hauling firewood and lifting pots. The zip tie snapped. She moved to his ankles, repeating the process. When he was free, she stood up and offered her arm. "We need to leave. Now." He didn't speak, just tried to stand. His legs wobbled. She stepped in, placed his arm around her shoulder, and held his waist with her other hand. He leaned on her heavily. She didn't complain. They stepped out of the building together, slow and quiet, her eyes scanning the road for anyone who might be watching. There was no one. Not yet. They moved through the bushes, taking the long way around, staying low. After nearly 15 minutes of careful walking, they reached a small hut near the edge of the farmland, her father's old storage shed. It had no electricity, but the roof held. It was dry, hidden, and safe enough. She helped him onto a woven mat, fetched a cup of water from the clay pot beside the wall, and handed it to him. He drank slowly, each sip shaking slightly in his grip. "Who are you?" she asked quietly, crouching beside him. He paused, then replied, Dan, from the next village. She didn't believe him, but she didn't push. Well, Dan, whoever did this to you, they're bad people. You can't stay here long. He nodded. His breathing had steadied, but he looked exhausted. Thank you, he said, voice hoarse. Amina gave him a small, tired smile. Rest for now? I'll come back later. When she returned home, she said nothing. Her mother, Kay Emil, asked where she'd been. She answered, selling corn. No buyers today. Her mother scoffed and muttered about laziness. Sirah rolled her eyes. Amina didn't respond. She just took a small plate of leftover rice after dinner and waited until the house was quiet. Later that night, she slipped back to the shed and found him asleep. She placed the plate beside him, checked his temperature with the back of her hand, and adjusted the wrapper he was using as a blanket. Then she sat beside him on the floor and looked at him closely, at the bruises on his face, the way he flinched in his sleep, how even in rest he didn't seem at peace. This man had come from a world far from hers. She could see it in his skin, in the shape of his hands, in the way he whispered, thank you, like he wasn't used to needing anyone. And yet here he was, lying on a mat in her father's shed, fed with her rice covered with her cloth saved by her hands. She didn't understand why she had done it, but she didn't regret it. Back in New York, no one knew Harry Ward was missing. Not yet. His apartment door remained locked. His car was gone, parked neatly in a long-term garage thanks to one of the kidnappers. His phone showed a few unread texts. Grayson had already taken care of the company group chat, leaving a message through Harry's account, taking a few days off. Needed a reset. Don't worry, it was enough to buy time. And in the village of Elunwe, a girl who had never been seen by the world was now the only reason a man who once ruled it was still alive. Neither of them knew what would come next. But for now, in the quiet dark of that farm, Shed two worlds had touched, and nothing would ever be the same again. It was still early when Amin awoke, long before the birds began their morning calls. Her body was tired from the night before carrying rice in a tin bowl, sneaking through the bush path with a flickering lantern, checking on a man who barely spoke, but her mind was alert. She moved quietly as always, careful not to wake her mother or Sirah. She had hidden the bowl under her bed after Harry, or Dan, as he had told her to call him, finished eating. He hadn't said much, but his eyes had softened when she sat beside him and asked how he was feeling. That was enough. She didn't expect gratitude, she just didn't want him to die. This morning, the sun had not yet fully broken through the haze, and the village was wrapped in that early stillness where everything feels like it's waiting. Amina dressed quickly, wrapping her headscarf tight, slipping her feet into her worn slippers. She grabbed the bag with 2 boiled corns wrapped in cloth, some water in a plastic bottle, and made her way out. She moved with intention, avoiding the front door. She knew her mother had a sharp ear for morning sounds. The shed wasn't far, just a few minutes along the side of the cassava plot. The air smelled of dew and smoke. She had walked this path so many times before, but never with the weight she carried now. When she reached the shed, she tapped gently on the wooden plank and waited. No sound came from inside. She pushed the door open and stepped in. Harry was sitting up, leaning against the wall. He looked better, less pale, more focused. His eyes met hers, and he gave a small nod. "You're up early," she said, setting the food down beside him. "I didn't sleep much," he replied, voice low and gravelly. "Didn't want to drift too far." Amina handed him the corn and water. He took them, nodded again, and chewed slowly. "I'll need to find somewhere else for you soon," she said. "If they know I'm hiding someone." Harry nodded. "I understand. I won't stay long." She looked at him carefully. "You still won't tell me your real name." His eyes lingered on hers for a moment, then drifted away. Not yet. Amina didn't press. She didn't need answers. She just needed to know he wasn't dangerous. Her instinct told her he wasn't. But as fate would have it, someone else had followed her that morning. Sirah had woken to the faint creak of the back gate and the hush of steps on dry earth. She had always suspected Amina was hiding something. Her younger sister had been acting strange for days, distracted, defensive, slipping out of the house with bowls of food, but returning with nothing in hand. Sirah wasn't concerned out of love. She was curious and a little bitter. The only thing worse than being called cheap by your mother every night was watching your younger sister walk around like she was better too holy, to hustle too proud to wear makeup, or flirt with rich men at the market. So this morning she followed. She waited a few minutes after Amina left, threw on a wrapper, slipped her feet into slippers, and moved quietly through the side path. She didn't need to walk far. When she got close to the shed, she stopped and peeked through the crack between the wooden panels. And what she saw made her blood boil, not from concern, but from triumph. There he was, a white man, sitting up, eating Amina's food. Shira pushed the door open without knocking. The wooden plank creaked loudly. Amina spun around in shock. Harry tensed halfway through a bite. What the hell is this? Shira's voice was sharp, loud enough to cut through the trees. Amina stood quickly. Shira, wait. Is this what you've been hiding? Shira stepped in, arms crossed. A white man in Papa's shed. Harry didn't speak. He looked at Amina, uncertain. Amina's heart pounded. It's not what you think Amina said. Shira laughed harshly. Really? Then tell me, sister. Are you feeding him because he's your boyfriend now? Or are you planning to sell him later? She turned to Harry, who remained still, watching both women. What cat got your tongue? You let this little saint rescue you, and now you're mute? Amina stepped forward. Stop, please. I should call Mama, Shira said. Let's see what she thinks of her holy daughter hiding a man in secret. Shira, he was tied up, dying. I found him near the old road. I couldn't just leave him. Shira rolled her eyes. So you brought him here, into our father's shed, gave him food, water, and who knows what else. You think this is charity. This is stupidity. Amina's voice cracked. He needed help. And what about us? Do we not need help? Shira snapped. Mama cries every night about money. I bring it. You bring corn and shame. The words cut deeper than intended. Harry looked down. Amina stepped back. I'll tell her, Shira said, turning on her heel. Please don't, Amina whispered. But it was too late. Within 10 minutes, Camille was there, stomping across the grass with fire in her eyes. She burst into the shed, her voice trembling with rage. What am I hearing, Amina? Is this true? She looked at the man, then back at her daughter. You brought a man here, a grown man. You lied to me under my roof. He was dying. Amina said, her voice barely steady. I found him. He was tied up like a dog. And you untied him and made him your guest. Camille's nostrils flared. This is what your father died for, so you could bring strangers into our land. Harry tried to speak. Ma'am, I don't talk to me. She snapped, not looking at him. You don't belong here. Amina stood firm. He's done nothing wrong. I saved his life, and in return you spit on mine. Camille shouted. You want to feed this man? Then go live with him. Get out, both of you, now. Amina's breath caught in her throat. She looked at Harry, who looked lost, then back at her mother. I mean it, Camille said. Take your white ghost and go. For a long second, no one moved. Then Amina walked to the corner of the shed, picked up her bag of clothes, and turned to Harry. Come, she said. Harry hesitated, but then slowly stood. He followed her out. They walked past Shira, who stood smirking with her arms crossed past the compound gate, past the cassava field, and into the path that led back to the road. Amina didn't cry. She didn't speak. But something inside her had changed, and Harry, for the first time since this began, saw not just the woman who saved him, but the woman who had just lost everything to protect someone she barely knew, and that realization would stay with him far longer than any bruise. The road was quiet that evening, but Amina's heart was not. After being thrown out of her home with Harry, she had led him to a nearby cluster of old storage huts behind the village's abandoned schoolyard. It was the only place far enough from wandering eyes and distant enough to keep their presence unnoticed for now. Harry's strength was slowly returning. He was eating more, sleeping better. His bruises had faded slightly, but the confusion in his eyes remained. He often stared into the fire Amina lit for warmth, his hands clasped tightly as if holding on to something unseen. Amina noticed, but she didn't pry. She believed in giving people time-space to breathe, space to trust. That night, as the wind brushed through the dry grass, Amina returned from fetching water and paused near the hut. Voices. She ducked low, moving silently toward the trees near the rear. Her breath caught when she saw them, the same men, the ones who had tied Harry up. They stood near the bushes, smoking, pacing, talking low. She couldn't hear it all, but then a name cut through the air, clearly sharp as a knife. Grayson Merrick said, we find him by tomorrow, or we're done. Amina froze. She pressed her hand to her chest, listening. Another man spoke. He's not going to be happy. We told him we had the guy locked up. Grayson Merrick doesn't care. He just wants the money. Said the guy was worth more dead than alive anyway. The men laughed, cold and careless. Amina backed away slowly, careful not to snap a twig. Her heart thundered in her ears. When she reached the hut, Harry looked up immediately. What is it? He asked. She locked the door, dropped the water, and knelt in front of him. They're back. Not far. I heard them talking. Harry straightened. Did they see you? No. but they mentioned a name. I think it means something to you." Harry narrowed his eyes. "What name?" Amina hesitated, then spoke clearly. "Grayson Merrick." Silence. A long, painful silence. Harry blinked slowly. "Say that again." "They said Grayson Merrick wants them to find you, that he doesn't care what happens next, just that he gets the money." Harry stared at her, but his eyes weren't on her. They were far away, seeing something only he could see. He shook his head slowly, barely breathing. "No," he whispered, "not him." "Who is he?" Amina asked softly. Harry sat back, the air knocked from his lungs like he had been punched. "Grayson Merrick. He's not just anyone. He's my best friend, my business partner. We went to school together. He was at my house last week." He stood up suddenly, pacing in the tiny room, hands in his hair. "This doesn't make sense. He knows my family. My father trusts him. He handles legal accounts for the company. I helped him build everything he has." Amina said nothing. She watched as the pieces fell apart in his eyes. "We traveled together. I covered for him when he couldn't make board meetings. He said I was like a brother to him." He turned to Amina, eyes wide, voice broken. "Why would he do this to me?" Amina's voice was quiet but steady. "Maybe because you trusted him too much. Maybe because men like him don't see people like you as human, just as steps." Harry sat down, his shoulders heavy. He was silent for a long time. The fire crackled. Outside, a dog barked in the distance. Finally, he spoke again. "If it's him, then this wasn't random. He planned it. That car. The exact route. The driver being off that day." Amina nodded slowly. "And you were alone. Vulnerable." Harry let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a cry. "I trusted him. I told him things I didn't tell anyone. When my mother was sick last year, he sat with me." Amina moved closer, sat beside him. She didn't touch him. She didn't need to. "What will you do?" she asked. He stared at the flames. "I need proof. I need to make sure. And then I'll make him pay. Not just for what he did to me, but for thinking he could." There was no rage in Harry's voice, only a deep, controlled ache that simmered under every word. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat upright, watching the fire, listening to the wind, replaying conversations in his head, all the signs he had missed, every casual comment, every odd look, every late night when Grayson Merrick said, "Let me handle it. You get some rest." The betrayal did not feel like a stab. It felt like a slow, choking grip that had been building for years. And now it had a name. The first bus out of Illinois left just after dawn, its worn-out tires kicking dust into the still morning air. Amina stood at the edge of the unpaved station, clutching a small cloth bag to her chest. Inside it were 2 tickets paid for with nearly every coin she had managed to save over the past year. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the decision she had made. Behind her, the village lay quiet, unaware that the girl they had dismissed as a burden was about to disappear into the unknown with a man they would never dare to shelter. Harry sat inside the last row of the bus, his body still weak, his movements sluggish. He leaned against the window with a woolen cap pulled low over his forehead and an oversized jacket hiding most of his frame. His eyes, though dulled from exhaustion, flicked toward Amina as she boarded. She didn't say anything at first. She just took the seat beside him and placed her bag between them. When the bus jolted forward, Harry turned to her slowly. "Are you sure about this?" he asked, his voice barely more than a rasp. Amina looked straight ahead, watching the red dirt path stretch into fields and hills. "If we stay here, they will find you. If we go, maybe we still have a chance." He tried to offer a nod, but winced, the pain still fresh in his ribs. For a few moments, silence filled the space between them, comfortable yet heavy. Amina reached into her bag and pulled out a bottle of water, holding it out without turning. He took it with trembling fingers. Their hands brushed for the first time that morning, and something quiet passed between them. Not affection, not yet, but a recognition, 2 people pushed to the edge, leaning on each other to not fall. Outside the bus, the scenery changed slowly. The lush greens gave way to dry plains. Farmers walked with baskets on their heads. Children played in brown puddles. Every so often, a passenger would glance back at the strange pair in the back row. Amina noticed. So did Harry. And even though nothing was said, their eyes carried the kind of judgment that was unmistakable. He was white. She was black. He looked broken. She looked determined. It didn't fit the picture the world was used to. One woman muttered just loud enough for them to hear, "These girls today, they'll do anything for a man." Amina ignored it. Harry flinched. "Why don't you let me pay you back?" Harry whispered. Amina turned to him, her voice low but firm. "This isn't a transaction. I'm helping you because it's right, not because I want your money." Harry looked away ashamed. He wasn't used to this. In his world, nothing came without a contract, an invoice, or a camera flash. But this girl had risked everything, her safety, her home, her future, for someone she didn't even know. And she had done it without asking for anything in return. As the bus rumbled on, Harry began to drift in and out of sleep. Amina stayed awake. Every bump in the road, every loud conversation from other passengers made her more alert. She knew they were still not safe. Those men could be looking. She didn't know if they had pictures of them or if they were watching the bus routes. All she knew was that she had to get him to the city, to people who could protect him, to his world, whatever that was. Hours passed. At a small roadside stop, they got down for food. Amina bought a bowl of rice and some fried plantain, counting every coin carefully. Harry stood beside her, his head lowered still, trying to avoid attention. When they sat to eat, she noticed him watching her hands. "You cook?" he asked suddenly. She shrugged. "I roast corn. That's cooking, sort of." He chuckled, a soft, dry sound that faded quickly. Then he grew serious. "You're really strong. I mean it. Stronger than most people I know." Amina didn't smile. She just kept eating. Strong doesn't mean unbreakable. Harry looked down. He understood that now. She wasn't trying to impress him. She wasn't playing the role of a savior. She was simply surviving and choosing to drag him along with her, even when it would have been easier to leave him behind. When they finally reached the outskirts of the city, it was dusk. The sky had turned a soft orange, and tall buildings began to pierce the horizon. Harry's posture changed. He sat straighter, his eyes sharpened. This was familiar ground. But Amina noticed something else: hesitation. He wasn't the same man who had left this city. Something in him had shifted. They got off the bus and walked for a while until they found a small guest house. It wasn't luxurious, but it was safe enough for the night. Amina paid the fee, and the old woman behind the desk gave her a skeptical look before handing over the keys. As they entered the small room, Harry sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his shoes. I've never had to depend on anyone like this," he said quietly. Amina sat on the chair near the door, folding her arms. "That's not a bad thing. It means you're learning something." "What do you think I'm learning?" he asked. She paused. "Humility, humanity, maybe even love." The word hung in the air. She didn't mean romantic love, not yet, but a kind of love that went deeper, the kind that lets people see past wealth race or status, the kind Harry had never needed to feel before, until now. That night she made him tea from herbs she found in her bag. He sipped slowly, his hands steadier. The bruises on his face had started to fade, the wounds on his pride not so much. But when she stood to leave the room and sleep on the floor in the hallway, he reached out instinctively. "Stay here, please. It's okay. Just stay." She looked at him, unsure. "I won't touch you," he said quickly. I don't want to be alone." She nodded and sat back down. They didn't talk. They didn't move. But for the first time in days, they both slept deeply. By morning, Harry was stronger. His voice had regained firmness. His thoughts were clearer. He sat by the window, watching the city wake up, and turned to Amina. "I think it's time I go home. My real home." Amina looked at him. "Are you ready?" He nodded. "Because of you." And just like that, the man who had been beaten, tied, and left for dead was ready to reclaim his life, not as a billionaire, but as a man who had finally learned what it meant to be human. The city looked different now, not because the buildings had changed or the streets were unfamiliar, but because Harry Ward had returned as someone else. The man who had once commanded boardrooms and private jets was now walking through the front doors of the Metropolitan Police Department with nothing but his voice and the truth. Amina Radebe walked quietly beside him, her eyes steady, her presence calm. She held no papers, no proof, just her memory and the name she overheard in the shadows of the bush, Grayson Merrick. Harry had called ahead, requesting to speak directly to the lead investigator on violent crimes. The officer, a man in his 50s named Detective Harlan Ross, met them in the waiting room. He looked skeptical when he saw Amina, then shifted his eyes to Harry. "You said you're Harry Ward, the Harry Ward." Harry nodded. "Yes, sir. I've been missing for over a week. I was kidnapped. I was held in a village 200 miles away. This woman saved my life." Ross blinked and leaned forward. "Start from the beginning." The statement took over an hour. Harry recounted every detail: being blocked on the road, dragged out of his car, slapped, tied up, and stripped of his belongings. He described the uncompleted building, the voices, the pain. Then he stepped back and let Amina speak. Her voice was firm and precise. She spoke of the three men, how she saw them again near the bush path, and how she heard one of them make a phone call and say a name. They called him Sir Grayson Merrick. The name shifted something in the room. Detective Ross sat back silent for a moment, then scribbled something into his notebook. Harry added, "He's my former business partner. My best friend, at least, that's what I thought." Amina saw how Harry's jaw tightened. His hands were resting on his knees, but the knuckles were white. He was holding back more than words. Within hours, a quiet investigation began. Ross verified Harry's identity. Security footage showed Harry's car leaving the city that night. Then nothing. The vehicle was found abandoned, stripped of plates, deep in a repair yard in an industrial area. The address connected to a shell company. And that company, it linked to Grayson Merrick. Ross moved quickly. Grayson was brought in for questioning under the guise of a routine audit. He came in, smiling, dressed in a slate blue suit, gold cufflinks glinting under the fluorescent lights. His handshake was firm, his charm undisturbed. But when he saw Harry seated in the observation room, his smile didn't return. Inside the interview chamber, Grayson's arrogance stood like armor. "I don't know what this is about," he began, cool and polished. "If you want my lawyers, I can call them right now." Ross didn't respond to the bait. "We just want to talk about a man named Harry Ward." Grayson raised an eyebrow, leaned back. "Harry, we've been worried sick. I've sent out messages, made posts. We even offered a reward for information. You're saying he's alive, he's here, and he says you arranged the entire thing." Grayson let out a low laugh. "That's absurd." But something flickered in his eyes. Not fear, something colder. Calculation. Ross opened the door and brought Harry in. Grayson's jaw twitched. His lips pulled into a thin smile. "Harry, my God, you look like hell. Where have you been?" Harry didn't answer immediately. He stood tall, arms folded. Then he spoke slowly, each word placed with intention. "Tell me, Grayson, when did you start thinking I was the problem?" Grayson scoffed. "Is that what this is about?" He looked to Ross. "This is personal. He's emotional. I'm not going to be accused without evidence." Harry stepped forward. "You hired those men. You paid them through one of your dummy corporations. They called you Sir Grayson. You wanted me dead. You thought no one would come looking because you knew I was alone that night." There was silence. Grayson's eyes narrowed. "You're putting your faith in her, that girl from the bush. You're believing her over me." Harry's voice was level. "I'm believing the person who risked her life to save mine. You couldn't even look me in the eye when I walked in. And then it came." Grayson snapped, leaning forward, voice low and bitter. "You let some poor black girl drag you back here, and now you think you owe her something. After all I've done for you." Detective Ross stood slowly. "That'll be all, Mr. Merrick." The room froze. Grayson had said too much. The tape was rolling, and his words had sunk like nails into the record. Later that day, charges were filed: conspiracy to kidnap, attempted murder, racketeering, and hate crimes. As the officers led Grayson away, Harry watched through the glass. He didn't feel triumphant. He felt hollow. Justice was necessary, but justice also exposed everything ugly, hiding behind years of smiles and partnership. Amina stood beside him in the hallway. She didn't say much. Her presence alone was enough. Finally, Harry turned to her. "He looked me in the eye every day for 10 years and lied." Amina met his gaze. "Now he can't lie anymore." Outside the station, the sky was starting to dim. Harry breathed in slowly. For the first time in days, he didn't feel hunted. For the first time in his life, he knew what it meant to be protected not by security, not by contracts, but by someone who simply chose to care. He turned to Amina again. "Let's go home." And this time, when he said the word home, he meant wherever she was going to. She had walked into the forest with dirt on her feet and smoke on her hands. Now she stood before a white iron gate, taller than any wall she had ever seen, unsure if she would be let in or quietly turned away. The SUV came to a halt just outside the estate. Tall hedges shaped like spirals lined the driveway, and 2 security guards flanked the open gate, nodding stiffly as the vehicle eased through. Amina sat quietly in the back seat, her fingers gently pressed together on her lap. She had changed into a simple navy dress Harry bought for her at a small boutique in the city. Nothing extravagant, but clean, well-fitted, and elegant in its quiet way. Her heart beat with a rhythm she hadn't known before. Not fear, not exactly. It was the hum of stepping into a world that never had space for someone like her. Harry glanced at her, trying to read her thoughts. "We're home," he said, but even he knew it wasn't quite true. Not yet. The mansion stood in quiet perfection. Cream white walls stretched 3 stories high. Wide windows framed with ivy, a front lawn so neatly trimmed it looked almost artificial, and a fountain in the shape of a swan spilling water in gentle arcs. A maid opened the front door before they even reached it, eyes taking in every detail of the woman walking beside her employer. She did not speak, but her posture stiffened. Inside the house smelled faintly of lavender and polish. Amina glanced around, absorbing the quiet wealth in every corner. Tall vases of fresh roses, a chandelier like falling diamonds, a grand piano resting in one corner as if waiting for a memory. The air felt cooler here, and she was unsure if it was the conditioning or the centuries of power behind the walls. Elizabeth Ward entered the foyer slowly. She was dressed in soft gray cashmere pearls at her neck. Her gaze stopped at Amina, not hostile, but distant. Mother Harry stepped forward. "This is Amina." A beat of silence. "Welcome," Elizabeth said. Voice measured. Her eyes never quite warmed. Amina dipped her head slightly. "Thank you for having me, ma'am." Elizabeth nodded once. "I'm sure you must be tired," then turned slightly. "Your room is prepared, Harry." Harry gestured toward the staircase. "Let me show you." They walked through the house in silence. Upstairs, the guest room was immaculate. White linens, silver frames, a quiet view of the garden below. Harry helped her place her small bag in the corner. When their eyes met, his were apologetic. "I'll talk to her," he said. "No need," Amina answered. "This is more than I've ever had." That evening, dinner was served in the main hall. A long table that could seat 20, but only 3 chairs were used. Elizabeth sat at the head, Harry and Amina on either side. A housekeeper brought the dishes: grilled salmon, asparagus, buttered rice wine. Amina thanked the woman with a warm smile. The woman blinked, unsure how to respond. Conversation was minimal. Elizabeth asked polite questions. "Where are you from, Amina? Do you enjoy city life? How long have you known Harry?" The tone wasn't cruel, but it carried a clinical edge, as if checking credentials. Amina answered calmly, honestly, and never once lost her warmth. But inside, she felt the weight of being observed, measured against expectations she never agreed to. After dinner, as the sun slipped below the edge of the garden, Elizabeth lingered by the fireplace. She sipped tea, eyes resting not on her son, but on the girl who had walked out of nowhere into their legacy. "You helped my son," she finally said. "That is something I will never forget." Amina looked up from her chair, her hands folded in her lap. "I didn't do it for something in return." "I believe you," Elizabeth said. "That's why I find it harder to understand." Amina didn't answer. Instead, she stood quietly. "May I help clear the dishes?" The question was so unexpected that the housekeeper passing by stopped in her tracks. Elizabeth's lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. That night, in the quiet of her room, Amina stood by the window, looking at the city skyline from the distance. The room was beautiful, but she missed the chirping of crickets, the smell of roasted corn, the sounds of children running down a dirt road. A part of her knew she could never go back. Another part wondered if she truly belonged here either. Harry knocked gently before stepping in. "How are you holding up?" Amina turned to him. "Your mother's trying. I can feel it. But I don't think she's ready yet." "She's not," Harry admitted. "But I see the way she watches you. She's learning." Amina nodded slowly. "So am I." They stood in the silence for a moment. "She asked me earlier if I was ashamed," Amina said quietly. Harry blinked. "Ashamed of what? Of where I come from? Of who I am? Of the fact that I had to run through a bush with a stranger's blood on my hands?" Harry's face tightened. He took a breath. "And what did you say?" I said no. "Because it's that girl, the one with smoke on her fingers and cracked sandals, who saved your life. Not this girl in a city dress." He stepped forward, gently took her hand. "And I thank God for her every day." Downstairs, Elizabeth Ward stood alone in the study, holding an old photograph, Harry as a boy, Grayson beside him. She thought of the betrayal, of the quiet, invisible ways she too had failed to see clearly. Her fingers trembled slightly as she set the frame down. Outside, the wind stirred the garden. For the first time in years, one of the glass panels on the mansion's front door was left slightly open, and the air that came through wasn't cold. It was early morning when the SUV rolled slowly down the narrow, dusty path leading into Elunwe village. The wind carried the scent of red earth and distant smoke. Birds scattered from low tree branches as the tires cracked the silence of a town that barely woke before the sun did. Amina sat upright in the back seat, her fingers tightly gripping a small cloth bag on her lap. Her eyes flicked between the road ahead and the blurred memories she had left behind in this place. Just a few months ago, she had walked these roads barefoot, her dignity scraped by shame and rejection. Today she returned not with revenge, but with a truth bigger than bitterness. Harry, seated beside her, glanced at her face, sensing the tension in her jaw and the hesitation in her breaths. He reached for her hand and gently placed his over it. His voice was calm but sure. "You don't owe them anything, Amina. But whatever you want to say, whatever you need to do, I'll be right beside you." Amina offered a faint nod. She hadn't planned to cry, but there was something about those words that unraveled the part of her that still sought permission to feel worthy. As the car pulled into the compound where she once lived, a figure stood up from a wooden bench outside the hut. Camille, her mother, squinted toward the road. She shielded her eyes with one hand, adjusting her wrapper with the other. From the shadows of the doorway, Sira slowly stepped out, her belly round and her pace slow. When the vehicle door opened and Amina stepped out, both women froze. Amina's dress was simple, but the elegance was unmistakable. Her hair was neatly braided, her skin clean and glowing, and she moved with a quiet self-assurance that neither of them had ever seen in her before. Then came Harry, tall, composed, dressed in a light suit, with his sleeves casually rolled. His skin tone, his posture, the way he held Amina's hand, all of it said something her family hadn't expected. It was a statement of choice of love and of alliance, and it shook them. Camille's mouth opened, then closed again. Shira blinked twice, then whispered, "Is that him? The man she was hiding?" Harry nodded first. "Good morning," he said gently, then waited. Amina stepped forward, not to boast, not to confront, but to anchor herself. "Mama," she began, voice steady but soft, "you asked me to leave because I helped a man. You said there was no place here for a girl who made choices you didn't agree with." She paused. Her eyes did not waver. "I'm not here to prove you wrong. I'm here because you're still my mother, and no matter what happened, I didn't forget that." Camille stared at her daughter, words tangled in her throat. She looked down at her own worn slippers as if the dust under her feet suddenly had meaning. For a moment, the silence between them felt heavier than judgment. From the back of the SUV, Harry retrieved 2 large bags, followed by the driver bringing out rice cooking oil, dried fish, and other supplies. Amina stepped back and gestured toward them. "These are for you and Sira. I don't know if it will fix anything, but I hope it helps." Sira stepped forward slowly. Her face had softened. Her eyes no longer carried that sharpness from their last encounter. "Why would you still care, Amina, after the way we treated you?" Amina smiled, not with pride, but with peace. "Because someone cared for me when I had nothing. It's not about who deserves what. It's about choosing not to be like the ones who gave up on you." Harry watched quietly, never interrupting. His gaze lingered on Amina, seeing her not just as the woman who saved him, but the woman who had saved herself. Camille stepped closer, her voice cracked like dry wood. I was scared. I thought I was protecting this house, protecting what's left of us, but maybe I forgot to protect you." Amina walked up to her and gently took her mother's hand. It was dry and thin veins etched like old stories. No more words were needed, no speeches, no lectures. Just a mother and a daughter, one acknowledging the other's return, not as a failure, but as someone who chose dignity. Behind them, Sira wiped her face. Her pregnancy had made her slower, but it had also made her quieter. She stepped to the side and looked at Amina. "They left me," she whispered. "None of them stayed. You were right. You were always right." Amina nodded slowly. "It's never too late to start again." After they had helped unload the supplies and said their goodbyes, Harry and Amina stepped back into the vehicle. As the car pulled away, she glanced out the window one last time. Her village did not look smaller, but she had grown larger than the pain it once held her in. Harry leaned slightly toward her. "That was more powerful than anything I've seen in a boardroom." She smiled, then looked down at his hand gently resting on hers. Forgiveness doesn't erase the past, but it does open the future. The SUV rolled on the dust behind them, rising like pages turned in an old book. They didn't need to talk more. They had said everything that mattered, and now the road ahead was theirs. The sky above the estate was brushed with hues of lavender and gold as the sun began to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. The garden was quiet yet alive with the rustle of leaves and the soft whisper of evening air. Birds chirped low as if they too were waiting for something important to happen. Harry Ward stood on the balcony, his gaze following the curves of the garden path below. His heart was steady but full. The man who had once sat bloodied and broken in a rotting shed now wore a simple collared shirt, clean jeans, and a soft, hesitant smile. He held a small velvet box in his pocket, and in his chest a hope bigger than any business deal he had ever closed. Down below, Amina walked slowly across the grass. She had chosen a simple cotton dress, pale green, like the first buds of spring, and wore her hair in a soft bun at the nape of her neck. She looked up as she felt his eyes on her, and her smile reached him like sunlight. She still found it hard to believe this place was real, that this piece was hers even for a moment. But today she didn't question it. She simply let herself feel it. Harry took the stairs 2 at a time, stepping out onto the garden, just as Amina reached the stone bench under the jacaranda tree. She turned as he approached. "You look like you've just seen something important," she said softly. "I did," he replied, his voice quiet. "You." He sat beside her, hands resting on his knees, heart pounding like the first day he had heard her voice. They didn't speak for a moment. The silence was full, not empty. Then he turned to her. "There's something I need to say, something I've been holding back because I didn't want it to be colored by gratitude or timing or any of the chaos we've been through. But it's been in me for days, Amina. Weeks, maybe. And I can't hold it anymore." She looked at him, her breath caught. "Harry." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the box. But he didn't open it yet. "The day you cut those ropes, you did more than save my life. You gave me a chance to see the world differently. You showed me that strength doesn't always come with money or power or titles. Sometimes it lives in a woman selling corn by the side of the road. Sometimes it lives in silence, in kindness, in sacrifice. I've met thousands of people in my life. No one has ever done what you did for me, not without wanting something in return." Amina's eyes began to well with tears. She looked down, unsure what to say. "I didn't save you for anything in return," she whispered. "I know," Harry said. "That's what makes it real. That's why it matters so much." He opened the box, and inside was a simple gold ring. No diamonds, no flash, just something honest. "I don't know what you see when you look at me now," he said. "Maybe I'm still a man trying to fix himself. Maybe I'm still too tied to the world I came from. But I know what I see when I look at you. I see the woman who stood when everyone else walked away. I see the heart that didn't bend under pressure. I see the only person I've ever trusted this completely." He took her hand, his fingers trembling just a little. "Amina Radebe, you changed my life with a matchstick, a knife, and a heart bigger than this mansion. I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me?" Amina didn't speak at first. Her free hand covered her mouth, and for a long moment the only sound was the breeze in the trees. Then in a voice soft and shaking, she said, I'm not sure I deserve this." Harry leaned closer. "Then let me be the one to spend my life reminding you that you do." She began to cry quietly, but with no shame. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Harry, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on her finger and pulled her into an embrace, not rushed, not overwhelmed, just steady, complete. The sky dimmed around them, but their world felt lit from within. In the house, Elizabeth watched quietly through the window. She had come to love Amina in her own way, though it had taken her longer than it should have. Now she wiped a tear from her cheek and whispered, "Good. Finally, something real." The day ended, not with fireworks or grand gestures, but with 2 people sitting hand in hand under a blooming tree planning nothing, just breathing together. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. The garden was no longer just a garden. It had been transformed into something out of a dream, a palace without walls open to the golden sky, where every breeze carried the scent of jasmine and hope. The estate grounds, already elegant, had become an ethereal canvas of grace and splendor. Rows of tall crystal arches framed the aisle, each wrapped in delicate vines and white orchids with golden ribbons flowing gently in the wind. Amina stood at the threshold of this dream, her heart pounding, not out of fear, but from the overwhelming beauty of it all. She wore a gown designed exclusively for her, a masterpiece of ivory satin and French lace hand-stitched with hundreds of tiny Swarovski crystals that shimmered like morning dew. The gown's train swept behind her like a river of light, and her veil, sheer and weightless, floated as she moved. On her head, a delicate silver tiara sat not to proclaim royalty, but to honor the grace with which she had endured everything life had thrown at her. Her bare shoulders carried no jewelry, just confidence and history. Harry, standing at the altar, beneath an arch of white roses and trailing lights, felt breathless. He wore a midnight black tuxedo, tailored with exacting precision, the inside lining embroidered with their initials H and A stitched with silver thread. His hair was neatly combed, his expression composed, but his eyes betrayed the storm of emotion inside. He had faced betrayal, humiliation, and pain. But in that moment, none of it mattered. His bride was walking toward him, and time stood still. The guest leaders, artists, villagers, and city folk alike rose to their feet. Among them sat Elizabeth Ward in a cream-colored gown, her hands clasped, her eyes moist, and that was all she needed. Across the garden, in a quieter row, Camille sat humbled and near tears, clutching a handkerchief. Beside her was Syrah, gently rocking her infant, her eyes never leaving her sister. The past was still present, but today it didn't hold the power to dictate who they could be. A choir sang from the balcony of the house, voices blending in a harmony so pure it felt sacred. The song was old, rooted in tradition, but its meaning rang clear love when true breaks walls, not hearts. As Amina reached the altar, Harry extended his hand and she took it without hesitation. The officiant and elder from Amina's old village, now living in the city, began the ceremony with a blessing that honored both ancestry and future. It wasn't scripted, it was soulful, real, layered with weight. Each vow spoken wasn't just a promise between two people, it was a declaration against everything that had tried to keep them apart. When Harry turned to his bride and said, "You saved me from death, but more than that, you saved me from blindness," his voice cracked ever so slightly. "You reminded me what justice feels like, not the kind that sits behind glass desks, but the kind that walks barefoot, shares its last piece of bread, and hides a stranger in the night." Amina looked into his eyes. "I wasn't looking to be loved. I just didn't want someone to die in silence." Their first kiss was slow, intentional, and when they embraced, it was as if every hand that had pushed them down had lost its grip for good. The celebration that followed was not just a party, it was a convergence of two worlds that had long misunderstood each other. The tent for the reception was made of clear panels that let the night sky in. Tables were draped in white silk topped with floating candles and bowls of flowers native to both Amina's village and Harry's estate. The menu was carefully chosen. East African spices met Western sauces, roasted meats accompanied by handmade pastries, and heirloom vegetables. There were dishes named not by cuisine, but by memory: the roadside corn, the first pap, the garden promise. As they danced their first dance beneath a ceiling of fairy lights and starry sky, Amina whispered, "I never believed in fairy tales." Harry pulled her closer and smiled. "That's all right. We're not one. We're real." Later, a small stage was set. Elizabeth stepped forward with a microphone in hand. Her voice was calm but firm. "I once believed that safety meant keeping to what we know. I now understand that safety is knowing who stands beside you when it matters most. Amina didn't just save my son. She reminded me who I raised him to be." She walked toward Amina and hugged her in front of everyone. In the back row, Syrah couldn't stop the tears from flowing. She had thought power came from money, attention, dominance. But tonight, she saw power in something else, in mercy, in strength wrapped in kindness, in her sister's quiet triumph. She clutched her child and whispered, "May you grow up to know women like her." Before the night ended, Harry stood one last time. His voice didn't need a microphone. "Some of you knew me as a businessman, some as a victim, some as a friend. But today I stand here simply as a man who was saved by a woman who had nothing but gave me everything. If this story is told again, let it not be about money, nor crime, nor betrayal. Let it be about what happens when someone chooses courage over comfort, love over fear." Fireworks lit the sky, not loud but elegant. Soft gold and silver sparkles floated upward. Amina looked up then at Harry, her eyes glowing. "Can you believe this is our life now?" Harry nodded. "Yes, because you made me believe." And somewhere far behind the garden gates, in the same world that once judged, doubted, and dismissed her, a quiet echo began to grow. It was not applause. It was something rarer. It was respect, and it would follow her forever. And so ends the journey of two souls who met in dust but rose in grace. If you've listened this far, thank you. Truly. This story wasn't just about love. It was about truth, dignity, and what it means to choose the right thing, even when it hurts. We invite you to share your feelings in the comments. What touched you most? What do you believe Harry and Amina taught us? Your voice matters. And if you believe in the power of storytelling, then stay with us, because this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. Subscribe, like, and join us next time for another journey of courage, love, and truth.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.